I'd like to call the Thursday, August 22nd, Watertown Board of Adjustments meeting to order. Start with a roll call.
Okay, Kays,
Here.
Oletsky,
Here.
Stein,
Here.
Dargis Johnson,
Here.
Culhane,
Here.
Ford,
Here.
Hanson, Blake, and Brink are absent. We have a quorum.
All right, thank you. First item on the agenda would be to approve the minutes from the August 8th meeting. Anybody like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
All right, so, second by Dan. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed. The first item on the Board of Adjustments to hear today is item 21.41403.5.
The owner applicant of this hearing is Jacob and Linda Smith. The property address is 211 10th Avenue Northeast. This is a conditional use request. The applicants seek board approval to operate a service business, a gunsmith firearms repair business, in their single-family dwelling located in the R1 Single-Family Residential District pursuant to 21-1403.5 and contingent upon compliance with Chapter 2170, Home Occupations and Standards, and 210202 2B7A through H, specific rules governing individual conditional uses. Staff finds that home occupations is a listed conditional use for the R1 Single-Family Residential District, and the definition of home occupation is any occupation which is clearly secondary to the main use of the premises as a dwelling and does not change the character thereof or have any exterior evidence of such secondary use other than a non-illuminated sign not exceeding 400 square inches in area. This occupation shall be carried on or conducted only by the members of a family residing in the dwelling. The applicant submitted written request, site plan, and floor plan, which reflect compliance or non-compliance with the following terms of the ordinance. Section 210202 2B7A through H, specific rules governing individual conditional uses, is this is a board review of ingress and egress, off-street parking and loading, screening and buffering, signage, exterior lighting, required yards and open space, and general compatibility with the neighborhood. Chapter 2170, Home Occupations and Standards. Smith proposes to utilize approximately 395 square feet, or 16% of the 2,574 square foot single-family dwelling for the repair business. He has signed his assurance to comply with Chapter 2170, the Home Occupations and Standards, and the proposed signage meets ordinance regulations. Chapter 2163 is off-street parking and loading requirements and engineering design standards. This property has no front street access. There is a 3-car unattached garage at the rear of the property where there's approximately 18 feet of driveway apron off the alley right-of-way, and a minimum of 2 off-street parking spaces are required just for the single-family dwelling use. So this board may require more as a condition of secondary use approval, such as home occupation. Chapter 2165, outside storage and display requirements for specific uses. 217002, which is, again, home occupations and standards, supersedes Chapter 2165, and they will be compliant with that. So this board must determine if the request shows satisfactory provision and arrangement concerning all of the chapters and titles and sections just discussed, and if endorsed, this board may consider imposing any conditions of approval deemed necessary or appropriate for this secondary use, such as fulfillment of any and all lacking boulevard infrastructure requirements or additional off-street parking spaces, etc.
Could you speak a little bit more about, did I hear you say that there was no parking available at all? I didn't quite catch that.
There are actually we have a 3-car garage in the back or alley side. And there are 3 parking spaces available, whether it's inside or out. You can't count the one if you have to move a car to get another out. So 3 basically are available in back. They didn't give me the dimension So it may not meet the exact 18 and a half to 20 feet, but it appears to be about 18 feet of car length.
Were there any objections that you received from any of the neighbors?
I didn't receive any, no.
All right. Is the applicant here today? Did they want to come up and speak?
I thought they were going to be here, but I don't see them.
All right, because one of the questions I was going to ask you is, they mentioned they're doing this because there's no gunsmiths in Watertown for them to work for. But didn't we just approve somebody not too long ago for guns?
Gun sales, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was more sales. And he was gonna go to shows and do more online, kind of being the middleman. This is a repair.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Mr. City Attorney, regarding most recent state law 919-20 that was done in the last legislative session, it states there that municipalities shan't pass an ordinance that restricts, prohibits, or imposes any licensure. However, it doesn't apply to zoning regulations as long as the zoning codes doesn't prohibit that specific use. So that's a little bit confusing.
Are you sure you're looking at the enrolled version of
This is
that?
the enrolled version, yeah. The last sentence says, this section does not apply to any generally applicable zoning
Generally
ordinance,
applicable, yeah, so generally applicable.
building regulations or fire codes, as long as the ordinance regulation code is not used to circumvent a prohibition under this section. So how much latitude do we really have as a planning and zoning board by attaching conditions, approving or denying a permit that by the general application of the ordinance appears to circumvent the prohibition of the rule as laid out?
Well, I would say if you were going to deny the permit, it would have to be based on factors other than the simple factors relating to firearms.
Okay.
So if it was if it was a manufacturer of some sort, and you'd have to deny it based on the manufacturing process generally, not necessarily the fact that we're manufacturing guns.
It's not that I want to deny it, I just
No.
I wanted the stipulation.
Any other questions from Jill? For Jill?
Jill, you've had more conversations, the applicant isn't here, but it's not something that people would be coming and going on a daily basis, was it from the letter? One person at a time within the shop, 4 to 5 customers a week, so we're not talking about a lot of traffic.
Correct.
That's what he also conveyed to you on
Yes.
our personal conversation.
Every customer anticipated would be somebody who would probably be contacting him beforehand, and then he would tell them when to come in and et cetera. So, yes.
Did he state anything about having to, once the gun is repaired, to sight it in? I mean, obviously you can't shoot it in town, but I mean, is there going to be any ammunition on site, did he say?
I can't answer whether there will be ammo on site. You can't shoot a gun in town, so I'm assuming he'll be using the gun range and that kind of a thing.
I'd be hard pressed to believe that he didn't have ammo on the site. All of us do.
Yeah, we all do.
Lots of it.
So a little different when you're actually, repairing.
And you said that you had no neighbors testifying or saying anything against the request?
I've had no contact, no one's contacted me with either, yeah, this is great, or no, I don't want this. I know there's at least one neighbor observing today.
How close are we to a school? Not that, again, that probably matters, but just out of curiosity. That'd be the Christian school in there, I think. Yeah, Great Plains or St. Martin's, whatever they call it.
Well, this is, you'll see the blue here, that's the parcel. This is the cemetery. We've got the track here. Hospital. So this is about a 10,000 square foot radius approximately, looks like.
I was going to do that as soon as you guys are done.
Commissioner, just in reference to the school, I just quick pulled a measurement off the map here, about 880 feet to the St. Martin School up 2nd Street from 10th Avenue. I would also note, just for the record, in regards to the parking, 10th Avenue Northeast has prohibited parking all along that route. I believe the whole length of it. I just confirmed on Google Earth Street View that it is restricted in front of this property. No parking allowed on the street in front of that parking, in front of that property.
Even across the street, there's no parking? I couldn't remember. I know there wasn't on one side, but so both sides, none. Okay.
Jill, did he indicate where his sign would be? I assume he'd put it out front then, or, again, not that that matters, I'm just curious.
Says in the letter alley facing.
Alley facing, okay.
All right, I'd like to, I understand the applicant isn't here, but open up to a public hearing if there's anyone to speak on behalf or against this request. They can come to the microphone now. Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Board discussion?
The only thing I can see is, do we want to use this as an opportunity for like a waiver right to protest on the sidewalk or something like that? It doesn't look like there's sidewalk, but it doesn't look like there's anywhere else on the, adjacent blocks.
Either side of the street.
Yeah.
I think he needs the trees, doesn't he? He needs trees too.
You can certainly include that in a motion, or whoever would make a motion, if they'd like.
I'll make a motion to approve, subject to the applicant signing a waiver of right to protest any future need for a sidewalk to be constructed on the property. And are the trees sufficient or not? Okay, that's it.
All right, second? All right, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Next item. 19789.
The owner applicant is David and Catherine Englert. The property address is 700 South Lake Drive. And the application was submitted requesting to enlarge a legal non-conforming 484 square foot unattached garage by constructing a non-conforming 176 square foot addition onto the west side. Said addition proposed to be constructed 8.4 feet from the rear south property line, where a minimum 20 feet is required, creating a 660 square foot non-conforming building, which would occupy 34% of the required rear yard, where a maximum 30% coverage is allowed. Just for reference, the existing non-conforming 484 square foot unattached garage currently encroaches into the required yard approximately 9 feet from the south property line, where a minimum 20 feet is required, and it occupies 24% of the required rear yard, where a maximum 30% coverage is allowed. The application was denied based on the following ordinance regulations. 210302 prohibits the creation, alteration, or enlargement of non-conforming structures so as to conflict or further conflict with ordinance regulations. 21102 is residential height and placement regulations for accessory structures. And Chapter 2160, required yards and open space, All required yards or setbacks shall be open, unoccupied space extending from the natural ground level to the sky with no obstructions, and no adjacent open space shall be used to satisfy any yard setback required for any other structure, and no yard setback shall be reduced in dimension below the minimum requirement set for the district in which such yard or lot is located. So the applicant appeals that part of those parts of the ordinance. Staff finds that the applicant's existing 484 square foot two-car garage, detached garage, is a legal non-conforming structure. And the proposed 176 square foot non-conforming addition would extend the length of the encroaching building from 22 to 30 feet along the 56-foot rear property line, with an 8.4 foot to 10-foot setback where a 20-foot setback is required, and thus occupying, again, approximately 34% of the required rear yard where 30% coverage is allowed. The addition is proposed to be a separate room from the existing garage. The applicant plans to preserve the existing walls of the original structure, adding a doorway between and re-roofing the entire enlarged 660 square foot non-conforming garage. There will be no dwelling at any time. The applicant understands this. This parcel lacks standard boulevard and infrastructure requirements. Approximately 72% of the boulevard frontage is paved, and installing an apron driveway for this addition would essentially eliminate any compliant grassed boulevard area. This board has the authority to require fulfillment of any and all boulevard infrastructure requirements in conjunction with any structural improvements authorized by building permit.
All right, thank you.
I just want to add one comment. The legal non-conforming, this is, at the time the garage was built, it was perfectly legal. It's only been made illegal by us zoning over the top of whatever is existing, so.
Kenny, when was the original building, the original garage built there? 1980?
Jill, can you pull this
And the
picture up on the screen?
And the setback, and the rear yard setback in 1980 was 9 foot.
I'm not sure if it was 9. It didn't show on the permit, but
no variance was required when it was initially built back in 1980.
correct.
So we can presume that it was built in
Yes. This is the permit right here, and it shows, it doesn't show any dimensions of setbacks.
So was the way what we're doing here is the large garage door to the right is effectively the existing garage, and they're going to add on, or want to add on, that smaller door to the, I guess, our left. And did the applicant say, if I missed that they're going to basically re-side the entire structure, or they're just going to add on
The structure, the envelope of the structure is staying. The walls are remaining, and but they are going to put a new roof across the entire new structure to make it look more even, and then probably residing, I would imagine.
Mr. Chair, question for staff. So if this extension was built and it encroaches into the side yard where at 6 feet, how close would it be to the neighboring building to the west, I guess that would be?
The 6-foot setback is legal. If it came to us today with a 6-foot west setback and a 20-foot south setback, we'd permit it. But the issue is the south setback.
But you got it here that the 6 foot is okay because we allow that 10% on small lots. Is that what it is?
Correct. Down to 6.
But even with the how big is their overhang gonna be?
Probably 1 foot. Wouldn't be any more than that, would it, Pat? I would assume a 1 foot overhang.
Just 1 foot overhang? So the overhang doesn't count as part of the setback.
Right.
Would they be allowed to build, since it's not going to change the walls out, would they be allowed to build something between the house and the garage
Yes,
and meet all requirements then?
yes.
Would you go back to the digital and just slide a little bit to the west? The other west. Stop. I just was looking at what else the neighborhood looked like. Does the adjoining property owners to the either side, any comments from them?
No,
Are there any other properties along that stretch of road where they, by ordinance today, lack the grass space and the tree requirement? Okay, the answer is that most of them don't, right? And do we know the reason why we went for a 20-foot rear yard requirement along the lake when we did that?
It was so that a car could park in front of the garage without extending out beyond the property line.
according to ordinance, it's the same as in town with an alley situation. The South Lake Drive and the Lake Drives are to be observed the same as an alley.
Would we make the assumption that living at the lake is different than living in town? As far as the way the existing homes are built, the lots are platted, and how the land is utilized?
But it looks like there's boulevard parking from the lot line to the street. That allows one car length.
I'm not
correct?
going to testify that lot line is accurate, and we don't know that to be true. Can the individuals currently park behind their garage as it is without the car being in any driving lane?
Yes.
Yes?
Push it out right, touch the right.
What's the distance measured from the door of the garage to the edge of the drivable surface?
Commissioner Kays, it looks like there's roughly 19 feet there
Roughly 19.
to the paint line on the roadway. From the front of the garage to the paint line on the roadway.
Jill, are you telling me that they couldn't add on to the backside of the garage because of compliance to the?
No, they could have a conforming addition to the north of the garage, which would not infringe on any setback.
So they could put their door, in fact, facing that driveway, that existing driveway they have, just coming out sideways that way. So
This
they'd
way.
get their third stall, correct?
Yes.
So they really could do it and be totally conforming.
It would be, they still would have had to come to you because it is enlargement of a non-conforming accessory structure, but it would take away one variance, which is the main thing, which is the building, the 8.4 feet where 20 feet is required. to
And it
the
would
alley.
keep our front greenery that we don't have much of there anyway.
Yes.
Plus, it would keep that car coming in and out of that driveway front facing instead of backing into traffic.
The garage that they're talking about is not for actually a car. It's more of a smaller door, like a golf cart or something.
Or a small boat.
Jet ski trailer.
Yeah.
All the more reason to come off of their own driveway.
I mean, they're still going to be coming in and out through the main garage door, parking their cars.
And there is a driveway on that right-hand side of the garage.
Should we open up for public comment, Chair?
Any other questions for Jill before I open up the public comment? I'd like to open up the public hearing. If there's anyone here to speak on behalf or against this item, please approach the microphone. Please state your name.
Pat Mahold. The purpose is to
have a place to put lawnmowers and lake stuff, and to gain another parking place, which is off of the road, to get the cars off of the road. If you go by the point down to the country club and stuff, you'll see a lot of people parking on the outside, the south side of the road, and they're, most of the time they're over the white line. It's very tight in that area. And if you get any visiting people, it's very difficult. And the design was just thinking that the least infringement that would take place, and it would comply with all the other garages. There's many garages that are built the same way. The old Gaxtetter house is an example. That was a newer house, but they have a smaller place for wild golf carts in that case. But it's not a. It's just the driveway on the right will accommodate 2 cars, and then but if you get any company at all, we thought that we need the storage, and by setting it back, we could gain one more parking place for vehicles.
What is your thought as with respect to Commissioner Johnson's comment about putting the addition on the northeast corner of the garage to where you would access it from the existing driveway?
Well, you look at that, and right now she's got a lot of flowers and greenery. You break that up, and then it's just to get at it. You would you couldn't get a car in there, but off the other driveway. But we're not planning to use a car. It could be, but it's just, I think the fact of you wanting to have an additional parking place back there might offset trying to do it. And then that would pretty well fill up the backyard between the house and the garage.
Pat, do they currently utilize that paved area right now for parking purposes going up to the edge of the house?
Yes, yeah.
So generally, are there cars parked right where the garage is right now, or is most of the outdoor parking done on that paved
Yes,
area?
on the side driveway.
Pat? Since I'm just being.
Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
yes, Rhonda.
Okay. Your snow removal, I mean, I'm going to assume that you're blowing it onto that greenway right there now, right? I mean, I'm assuming, because that
Yeah.
would make sense to me. Where do you propose to push the snow once you have that completely filled in, other than 6 feet right there?
There'll be more than adequate space there.
To clean all of that driveway and put it,
Yeah, because you could be, some of it's put on between the house and the garage, and the other would be put on just like it is right now, except you're adding the 6 foot or 8 foot, excuse me, and through this last winter it wasn't a problem at all.
So you wouldn't be using that smaller garage in the wintertime, just in the summertime, and then you could put snow in front of that door?
Oh, you could, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because the purpose of it is the garage is undersized, you know, and it's very close to get 2 cars in, and they have to be short. And with the equipment and any lake stuff that you have, it makes it awful tough.
is this a year-round home?
Yeah. Built about 7 years ago, 8 years ago.
One comment, Mr. Vice Chairman. It appears that this might be, I don't know if this factors or not, but it might be a lift station, wastewater lift station.
There's
Control
on
panel.
the road.
Where are you pointing at?
There's a
And-
lift station out in
And
front
this
of-
property line probably is not correct as far as is the lift station on, does the property line go right beside their,
Yes.
okay.
So you're,
There's a lift station out on the road, and it's in the roadway.
Lift stations in the boulevard? Lift stations in the boulevard, from the lot line to the white line, painted line on the road?
It's in the road.
Yeah, it appears there's a vault for the sanitary sewer on or near that edge line within the pavement of the roadway. I would note though, and probably what staff is recognizing here, just based on the imagery, is there seems to be some telemetry or some radio telemetry instrumentation close or right on that lot line between this property and the property to the west. It is. It's correct. It's above ground mounted telemetry. I can only assume it's related to those vaults and the telemetry for the wastewater system, but I'd have to confirm that with the wastewater department to be certain.
so that would be a concern, Joe? Anybody?
Yeah, Commissioner Stein, I would say that it would depend on the amount of area that instrumentation takes up and whether it would be directly impacted by the installation of or construction of the garage expansion. There's a possibility it may not be impacted at all, but it is definitely something worth noting that we would not want it to impact that instrumentation.
It wouldn't impact.
Right, but
How would the instrumentation potentially be impacted by locating a garage 6 feet from the instrument?
Just by matter of fact of whatever physical space the instrumentation is taking up. I can't tell from the imagery here.
It doesn't mess with the telemetry of a building too close to it?
Should
or-
not have any effect in that regard, no.
Okay, I got a question. I've always wondered now, does that, when there's something going on and you see that red light go off, does that get a hold of the utility department and say, hey, we got a problem, or?
Yeah, most generally, sometimes that lighting can mean several different things, but most generally that's the case where a code has been set on the system and that provides notification through the dialing system on the telemetry that sends a notice to the wastewater operators.
Is that like a landline or a cell phone type line?
It could be directed to both or either. It depends on the system. I'm not familiar enough with our system to know, but I'm assuming that does go to a cellular call.
So a garage could impact the ability for it to call the utility department that says there's something going on here or not?
There's also an alarm that goes on, a very loud alarm.
The garage wouldn't impact it at all, because that's gonna be far enough away.
I would suspect
You got all
that,
driveway.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
You have all driveway, so it wouldn't impact it at all. It's on the edge of the driveway now, out in the road. And an additional driveway is not gonna impact that negatively at all.
It appears from the picture that if it's located in the southwest corner of that lot, it would be right on the edge of the other neighbor's driveway as well, so is that correct, Pat?
Well, there's about 4 feet, yeah.
I mean-
Their driveway's right on the lot
On
line.
the lot line, so, and
Yeah,
then,
so they'll be 6 feet away.
but the lift station's right next to their edge of their driveway
Yeah,
as well.
yeah.
But their garage is not. It's just the driveway.
What is code on that if minus any garage, if I just wanted to put a parking spot there, could I hard surface that, Ken?
Not without permission from Heath.
We would look at the, we have a couple criteria that would determine whether we would allow the widening of a driveway. One is the driveway width maximum allowed throughout the city for residential driveways, which is 36 feet. This obviously I don't believe would be exceeding that. The other one would be the green space requirement, whether we'd be minimizing that to a point into nonconformity. Am I forgetting a criteria there, Ken? Those are the two primary ones we would look at in consideration for a parking pad or widening of a driveway.
Recently, we had a request from the Hinder Rockers, which is a very similar request than this one. What was the disposition of that? Did we approve that variance?
The one about the Hindenracker one that I noticed when I was out walking the other day is that their overhang, they didn't put on rain gutters, and it just about dumps right onto the neighbor's garage. It's that close. And that's why I was asking about the overhang on this one too, but at least this one is going to be like at least 5 feet with a 5-foot overhang, so it won't dump onto the neighbor's building.
Was the Hinder Rocker application that we looked at, was that both? Was that a side yard and a rear yard, or just a side yard variance?
I believe it was both, but I'm not sure. I would have had to research that.
Okay, Heath? Heath, I guess just for clarity, can with this lift station situation, I mean, can we say with confidence that if this variance is granted and they built the garage there, there's no way that would have any impact on the functionality of that unit?
My biggest concern would be is if there's any physical improvements that would be impacted. I don't believe, based on the imagery, that would be the case. I think that this is going to be built outside the footprint of that existing telemetry, those physical improvements. So in that case, I'm confident that everything would function normally. It's just whether it would be physically disturbed by the construction, and the footprint of the existing infrastructure would be impacted by the construction of the expansion of the garage. I don't believe that's the case in looking at this.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Mahold?
Yeah, Pat, now when you guys do the new garage, will the garage stop at the garage, at the driveway stop at the garage wall, so we'll still have 6 feet of green space between the lot line, even with the driveway too?
Just like it is now, garden and stuff, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Anything else? All right. Thank you, Pat. Is anyone else here to speak on behalf or against this item? No one? All right, thank you. We'll close the public hearing. Discussion?
Mr. Vice Chairman, just for one point of clarity on my behalf, and Jill, maybe you know the answer to this, and I think you maybe just asked this, but I missed the answer. Is the intention to widen the driveway to accommodate the garage expansion?
I believe you would put an apron in front.
Because you're trying to use it for parking.
Yeah, they
Parking stall.
want to park there.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You know, with that being said, going back to the parking discussion, really the dilemma we're all facing here, whether it's an expansion of a parking stall or expansion of the garage, is the fact that we're dealing with the lake and lake properties, and the fact that we don't have a lake zoning district yet at this point. Just given the nature of what's out here, I guess me personally as a city engineer, I would not object to permitting a widened stall there, just given the nature of this. It's hard pressed for me to deny that when almost virtually every property along here exceeds that 36-foot width. I know that's not the by-the-book answer by any means, but we are dealing with the lake situation. And so in that regard, I, as a city engineer, I would not be opposed to the widening of that driveway for the construction of the garage.
But you would want the driveway to stop at the side of the garage, to the west, right? Not go,
Extend to the side yard.
yeah. Not
Correct.
go up to the neighbors and touch that way.
That's correct.
Okay.
All right, I guess one thing I see with this particular property, it is different than, you mentioned the Hinderackers and so on and so forth, with respect to, it does seem like there is a viable alternative for the addition to the northeast, again, perhaps not ideal. But again, and the reference was made about taking away some of the yard or the greenery. If the garage is added onto the, again, we're talking about the left here, you're taking everything away. Then there is no green space at all on the street side. And it also looks like that is not in line, again, in parallel to the road with the other structures along there as well. So it'd increase that.
Well, and the Hinderacker property also was much larger. This is just 56 feet. Where the Hinderacker property, I don't know how big it was, but it's certainly larger than this roadside frontage.
If you look what Jill is doing, it does line up with some of the garages, right, Jill, along there? That's the problem with this area. It's like what Diana just said, we have very small lots.
Excuse me, we're gonna have this request many times over the years if we don't come up with some sort of a solution from a regulatory standpoint. If I was sitting on the board for the next 10 years, we've seen 3, I've been on the board for almost 2, and I think there's been 4 of these types of requests. We've granted each one of them. I think it just bears the necessity to take a look at our lake park zoning to figure out if there's a way they can better address how we handle the parking, because we understand that our parking is on the roadside rear side, which is different than a front yard requirement in normal urban setting of Watertown. I can see 6 more requests in the next 2 years if somebody comes up and they want to do this. And so if we've been inclined to pass them in the past, I'm inclined to make a motion to approve it. But again, with the caveat that we need to come up with a better fix and doing this on a case-by-case basis.
With that being said, Todd, that's exactly why I think it needs to be stopped at this point. Instead of okaying everyone, we will stop having them come when there is alternative. There's alternative plan here that could be built off their own property instead of, it's a safety issue, it's a snow removal issue. If they really want to park there for the temporary company that comes on a weekend, let them park on the lawn. I mean, it's probably not going to hurt with a car sitting on that grass for, an hour or 2, whatever, 5. I just think that when we have they have the land to be able to do it, we need to be, tough enough to say, I'm sorry, but we cannot, because we are just defacing, in my opinion, we are just continuing to just clutter that whole area out there because we feel their pain. We all want 3 stalls of garage. I totally get it. But we aren't doing ourselves any favors by okaying all of these garages when there is an alternative solution on their own property, as opposed to be imposing on the next neighbor. That's where I think the buck needs to stop.
I agree with you, Rhonda, and I think clutter in that area is an adequate and appropriate description.
I don't want to be a jerk about it, but I appreciate the fact that they want to put their stuff inside, but they have the space to do it another way.
Any other discussion?
I'm pretty sure we did deny one of these when we first came on, but I'm not suggesting that we do that. I just, to clarify the record, I think that very first one we denied.
That was one, yeah. Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Do I have any more discussion?
Any more discussion? Nope. Time out.
Nothing?
All right, roll call vote, please.
Kays,
Yes.
Culhane,
Yes.
Oletsky,
Yes.
Stein,
No.
Dargis Johnson,
No.
and Ford.
No.
Motion does not pass.
All right, thank you. The next item, 1597.
Mr. Chair, based on the denial, I think we should probably have some sort of a finding that stipulates why the denial was made. If one of those that were voting nay would at least state a reason, just for the record.
Additionally, if they do want to do what Rhonda's planning, we still have to grant a variance anyways because it's a non-conforming structure, correct? So we should probably move to allow a variance to change the non-conforming structure.
Or they
Or
actually
they'd
should
have to
come back.
Yeah, so we might as well take care of it now while we got it up.
Well, we
Is there-
didn't,
Is there a waiting period between requests for variances?
well, it's substantially different than what we public noticed.
Okay. Anyway, I would like to, at least for the record, have somebody that voted against state the reasoning for it.
So I'll restate, I guess, the fact that they can put that on their own property is the biggest one.
That's all.
I'll back Rhonda up on that.
All right, thank you. Next item is 1597. In this case, I'm going to be recusing myself, and if Mr. Culhane has no objection, kind of the seniority method, if you would chair this item.
That's fine with me.
All right, thank you.
My name is Brent Mormon, Code Enforcement Officer for the City of Watertown, and I also do the sign permitting. Handle the sign applications and permits and requests for construction signs in Watertown. Applicant Lonnie Davis for Easy Store, permit number 1597, seeks approval to convert a current legal on-premise advertising sign to an off-premise advertising sign. The sign is located in the I-1 Light Industrial District. The existing sign does meet all the requirements of City Ordinance 21.8024, numbers 1 through 10, for the regulations of off-premise signs. Approving this application would allow Mr. Davis to then only do off-premise advertising on this sign. He would no longer be able to do any advertising for Easy Store on this sign.
I just want to add in a little bit on this. This is kind of a different thing because it's not actually listed as a conditional use or variance within our ordinance, but it does state in one premise that the board can allow an off-premise sign to be converted from an on-premise sign.
So by off premises, you don't mean he's moving it. He just wants to put different advertising on there.
Correct.
Well, I have struggled with that all week since we got this, trying to figure out where the heck he was moving this sign. And thank you for pointing that out, because it was my first question. Where is it going?
I seen him put in that great big into the ground.
Right.
It's the
Okay.
content.
It's a content issue, not a location issue.
Yeah, but even under the content issue, we are allowed to discriminate between off and on premise, which
Okay.
is what we're doing. We're not regulating the content, but we can regulate to what whether it's on or off, so.
But
And under
now-
our current ordinance, you're only allowed to do one or the other.
Doesn't that get us into that realm of not being content neutral?
No,
What was the question?
No, I don't think so, because I think in the Supreme Court decision in that did not get into the basis specifically of that decision, of whether, I mean, we can, if something is advertising something off base, we're not controlling the content, we're just saying it's something that's being advertised somewhere else.
and I apologize if I misspoke about content, but as opposed to advertising the location, you're advertising other things that are not on the location.
Right.
Correct.
So similar to that sign that's on Highway 20,
That's what I was just gonna ask.
That's on the
He does
set
that on
is,
Highway 20.
that changes,
But that sign shouldn't be there either.
but it's there. Right?
But on Highway 20, he advertises for a lot of different things, right? More than just
And
Easy
he's in
Store?
violation of
Correct.
doing that, Bonnie. That's the point.
Oh,
Ah.
Well, the sign on Highway 20 is not really an Easy Store sign per se. I believe David is here to clarify this possibly, but it's kind of take it like Montgomery Furniture. If he's got a sign there, but if he don't own that sign, then he can advertise, and he can actually advertise for Montgomery Furniture because it's a billboard sign advertising for somebody else.
And does he have the conditional use for that there?
Well, they came to the board and got granted from you guys, yeah. To put that billboard there.
I'm referring to the one on Highway 20 at this point, but
Should we open the public hearing? Are we good, staff?
Correct, yep.
Is there anybody here to speak for?
I'm here for Lonnie.
Go ahead, Mr. Straight.
I agree with what Ken said. I mean, this is not a request for a variance. This is not a request for a conditional use permit. We're here simply because there's an ordinance that says to grant the off-premises permit takes it out of the hands of the zoning officer. So we're here just saying, grant the permit. It's totally a conforming sign. He's met every part of the city ordinance that says it can be an off-premises sign. So there really shouldn't be an issue. And this is not about Highway 20. This is about 4th Avenue.
Mr. Straight, so any other industrial property zoned in the city, if I wanted to advertise Terex, but then I also wanted to put another billboard that advertised Todd's Barber Shop, that would be, and they came to us, we would be expected to do the same thing that maybe would be doing for Lonnie then.
The one thing Ken pointed out is part of the confusion. You can't do both. So I'm not sure, Todd, exactly what you're saying, but
Well, I'm just saying if, let's pick an industrial zone property, let's take Munger's storage buildings out on 212 on the south side. And each one of those has an on-premise business in some of those garages. And then Scott decides he wants to put on the side of a building 20 by 20 flashing sign advertising things that are not in that building but somewhere else, similar to what Lonnie's doing right now with his. So what we're saying is that would open up the entire city, that's industrial zone property, that we could do both on and off premise advertising.
no, we're only asking to do off-premises advertising. That's it. We're not asking to do both.
But you have an existing on-premise sign right there, that's the wood sign that's further to the east. How does that, would that go away then?
No, that's non-premise sign. He has enough frontage and enough space
For
to
two
have both
signs?
signs.
Okay.
The signs are greater than 50 foot apart. We stipulate that a off-premise sign can't be bigger than 280 square feet, but we don't have a minimum size on it. So it's less than that and it meets that requirement. So it's more than 500 feet from any other adjacent off-premise signage. That's what
So that's the
Greg
requirement.
alluded to. It met all the requirements required for a billboard. Typically, most of our off-premise signages are billboards, but
Does this rule apply to both commercial and industrial, only industrial property?
no, it's across the board. It's wherever a sign would be a permitted, period.
Residential zones as well?
If it was permitted. I can't say that without looking at the chart on front of me, but
But this rule applies to all billboards and the electronic billboard signs too?
It's any sign, it wouldn't necessarily have to be an electronic multi-messaging board, it could be just a static sign, I believe as well, correct?
Yeah, under this rule, you couldn't have a billboard that half advertised, a static billboard that half advertised Easy Store and half advertised Terex. You'd have to pick one or the other, even if it was a static board.
Okay, unfortunately, I'm gonna go back to Highway 20 a little bit. No,
Let,
okay.
let's resolve this first and then let's discuss S20.
I'm just trying to understand it in my head conceptually that, right now, the rule allows the Board of Adjustment to determine that any individual site, commercially or residentially zoned, where you're allowed to have off-premise signs, we can choose whether or not they get one or the other or both. Is that's what the rule allows?
You can rule whether it's an on-premise or an off-premise, yeah, but if it's off-premise, it does have a set of guides that it has to adhere to. It can't be closer than 50 feet to another sign, can't be closer than 500 feet to another off-premise sign, et cetera, et cetera.
So if we determine that this is an off-premise sign and it's fine and it meets all the other codes, then only the time that would fit somewhere else in town would be under a like situation.
Possibly, yeah, because it's also required.
I guess my point is, I'll be upfront on this, I don't wanna see multi-messaging boards on every commercial and industrial zone piece of property in town.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping you guys clarified to make it so
That's
we
my
don't do
point now,
off and
and
on-premise.
how do you, I've driven by the sign, I don't personally object to that sign in that location, but I could see going up and down, Kemp, that we're gonna start putting every 500 feet or every, feet, we'd have multi-messaging boards messaging all kinds of different things.
You've got an extensive number of ordinances to make sure that your concerns don't happen. But we've met every inch of the ordinance.
Okay.
And this is not where there's a standard, do you want to grant a variance? This is not a standard where you want to grant a conditional use. There is no legal standard to deny this.
If there is no legal standard to deny this, then I would be reluctantly, in favor of making a motion to approve with the direction to instruct staff that this does not proliferate through the community.
Public hearing's still open, I think.
Yeah, I'm just saying
Okay,
that's where I'm
I
gonna go,
understand.
that's where I'm going with it.
Anybody else for or against? Stuart?
Oh, do you want to sit here? Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Just a few comments. I'll try to keep it fairly brief. The intent of the sign code was to prevent on-premise signs from advertising off-premise businesses. That's why there's two separate distinctions in the sign code. Multiple representatives from the sign industry, including myself, some of you, the mayor, others arrived at the current sign code after hours and hours, meetings upon meetings over the last several years. The concern is that the potential precedents that could be established by granting this variance or permit, whatever terminology you want to use, a decision to approve this variance to the sign code could create a slippery slope, as Todd was mentioning, because I know the sign business well enough in Watertown to count through my head on Highway 212, Highway 81, Highway 20, Kemp. There's 35 to 40 different message centers out there, okay, with other commercial businesses in Watertown that have a message center. One of the components of not allowing on-premise signs to advertise off-premise businesses is to avoid visual sign clutter, as Mr. Kays mentioned, which is consistent with the sign code guidelines of other cities Watertown considered when updating its sign code. It would be difficult to deny a variance to any of those other 35 to 40 businesses if they wanted an exception made to their sign as well. So if this board believes that we should in fact allow Easy Store an exception and other businesses want to be able to convert their sign to promote off-premise advertising, it would be very difficult to deny those requests as well. So if if you feel as though this is something worth considering, I would just urge you to take a step back and refer this back to the sign code panel, the sign code committee, and allow a greater discussion to be had. Otherwise, I fear that this may be creating a precedent that you're going to have multiple businesses, including our own, coming back and asking for this same exact request.
Thank you for your honesty.
Thank you, Stuart.
I'm not pro or con to this requirement whatsoever, but again, you already have guidelines within the ordinance that says no off-premise sign can be closer to 500 feet to another one. It's got to be on a single pole. It's got to be not closer than 50 foot to another sign.
Okay,
So it's not like every single sign going up and down Kemper, 212, or anything else is going to meet all those requirements. That area is pretty well saturated already with what's going to be allowed to be off-premise signage.
We're not asking for an exception like Mr. Stein talks about. We don't need an exception.
But, okay, so.
Mike, please.
But you
Sorry.
need permit, but you need permission.
So can, when you're talking the number of feet from the off-premise, so the Easy Store sign that he has on the building, would that have to come down? And then the Woods V-shaped one in front of the car that he has parked there, would that have to come down, or are they far enough away?
They are far enough away. Yep. They're over 68 feet away.
The separation distance is only is between off-premise signs, not between off and on-premise signs.
I'm sorry, is a 50-foot separation between on-premise, between,
All signs, on and off.
I think it's all pole signs, but, and then off-premise signs is 500 feet. So you could have an on-premise sign as long as you're 50 foot away from that sign with this sign, then it meets that portion of the section. So then it still has to be 500 feet from another off-premise sign.
Okay,
So-
so is there a problem with where that, I'm gonna call it the wood sign, wasn't there an issue that that's too close to the street, or is that not too close to the street?
Well,
That was when they were looking at wanting to place this sign on top of that Easy Source sign, and that's why we said no to that.
Okay, all right.
Or we didn't get that, but that was the direction. So, for instance, then, so let's use Mike Lawrence and his real estate business. So he's got a sign that advertises his real estate business on that property. If he found 50 feet from his front door and that sign, and he could place a pole sign, and there wasn't another off-premise sign within 500 feet, he could place a sign there on his property. Because he's at least 50 feet away from his on-premise sign, and he's farther than 500 feet from another.
I'd like to look at it, but
I'm
theoretically, that's
just
correct. Yep.
using that as a scenario.
If it met all the other requirements, but I think there's a billboard closer than 500 feet
I
to his
think there
current
is one,
property.
but I think there is one, but I just wanted
Next to Foxy's, but,
Yeah.
so he wouldn't be allowed.
Right.
Okay, so the digital right now, when the picture just shows that it does, has his own advertising up there. So from now on, his own advertising can't be on there?
Correct.
And who regulates that? Who monitors that? Who sits there and watches?
I do.
The public.
Okay.
Anybody else? Public? For or against?
I'd just like to make one final comment.
All right, go ahead, Stuart.
I'm not disagreeing that the sign itself doesn't meet the requirements of an off-premise sign. That's not my point. The point is that there were hours and hours upon meetings of debating the philosophy of the sign code and how we wanted to regulate on-premise and off-premise advertising. That's what I'm getting at. That's the key part here, is that by granting this exception to the rule, it opens up a big box to figure out who's going to qualify for additional variances in the future. And I'm just asking the board to give that consideration, because that is a discussion that should go back to the sign code committee for further discussion, because this is in direct violation, if you will, of the sign code that was established with the intent behind it through all those meetings.
Thank you, Stuart. It's my understanding that this complies with the written code, the extensive written code that we've all spent a fair
Correct.
amount of time on, and I mean, okay, thank you.
Yep.
No, I don't.
Close the public hearing, and I'd look for motion.
Just to get on the floor for discussion, I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second that.
Motion by Kay, second by Bonnie. Do we have any discussion on the motion?
I wasn't on that sign committee, but I know how hard everyone worked on that sign and really went into a lot of depth. Was anything like this even discussed during that? Did it come to?
Well, we did have a large amount of discussion about whether the on-premise, off-premise thing was, and we strongly supported that there had to be two separate, on-premise and off-premise, so.
Todd, were you actually on it, on the subcommittee? Or
Over
one of the various
on
ones?
several of them over the last 20 years, yeah.
My only recollection was from the actual discussion that we had in the plan commission. But I mean, the time to legislate was then, right? I mean,
Yeah, and I guess I understand that in this is a specific, it's a unique situation. You've got a large lot with multiple faces, which allows for multiple signs to be located on there. And so it might not open the floodgates, so to speak, but, you know, it is concerning for me at this point. I'm still trying to understand the whole, the Sign Code Board of Appeals, which is technically the Board of Adjustment, so this is being taken as an appeal from the staff? That's how we're dealing with it right now? Yes, it's an appeal?
Well, it's a weird thing. It just says it can only be granted. No on-premise sign may be converted to off-premise sign without approval of the Board of Adjustment. That's all it says. That's
Statutorily,
it.
we as a Board of Adjustment only have the ability to issue variances, conditional uses, and hear appeals. That's my take. I mean,
Well, the ordinance says what Ken just said.
so we're acting as a Board of Adjustment, because that's what the Board of Appeals is now, is the Board of Adjustment, is it because of the ordinance change?
Yeah, there is no Sign Code Board of Appeals anymore.
So basically, okay.
certainly needs to be some tweaking,
It would
it
be an
looks like,
appeal.
but that's probably a discussion we had,
Yeah.
plan commission, and then,
I mean, we can argue about that right now, but I mean, in my understanding is we could assign by ordinance other duties to the Board of Adjustment. We could, you know, ask you guys to approve the color of toilets around town if you want. You know.
Don't, please
I mean,
don't.
Well, okay, so with that being said, can't we just say no? Okay, no.
you'll get a chance. Any other discussion? Any other discussion? All right, I'll call for a roll call.
Okay. Todd Case?
I'm going to defer to the next person, but I will vote.
Bonnie Letsky?
I'm gonna say no because I think it needs more tweaking. The sign code does.
Rhonda Dargitz Johnson?
No.
Liam Colhane?
Yes.
Diana Ford?
Yes.
I'm going to vote yes, reluctantly, because I think it does meet all the other aspects of the ordinance. I think the ordinance is flawed policy.
Motion. I'm waiting for Mr. Attorney.
there's 3 out of 5. Motion passes.
Motion passes.
Mr. Attorney, I'm just curious, you know, so it says all variances, and it has is a 2/3 vote. A conditional use is a simple majority of the board, but where, that's where I'm struggling with, what are we acting on? I mean, statutorily, I mean, all decisions of those, that's a variance. If this isn't a variance, what is it? It's not a conditional use. So, I mean, there's stipulations. That's where I'm confusing, I mean, whether or not it is truly passes on a 3-2 vote.
Motion passes subject to our actual legal authority if we have it.
I'm good with that.
Public comment, number 5.
Did you want to talk about Highway 20 or can I leave Bonnie?
I don't understand this at all.
Okay.
Anybody at all? Nope. Okay, old business, number 6. Nothing. Motion to adjourn. Motion from Vice Chairman, second by Diana. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right, let's get this road back on the show. We're gonna start the planning commission meeting. That's right.
We want to put the wheels back on the bus.
I'd like to call the Thursday, August 22nd, Watertown City Planning Commission meeting to order. Roll call.
Kays. Oletsky.
Present.
Stein.
Here.
Dargis Johnson.
Here.
Culhane.
Present.
Ford.
Here.
And Hanson, Dolly, and Brink are absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you. First one to make the invitation for any public comment later in the meeting, if there's anyone here that wants to speak to any item that's not on the agenda. And now we need an approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Approved.
We'll just bring it up new business, I think.
Next item, approval of minutes from the July 18th, 2019 meeting. Have a
So moved.
second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Motion passed. Number 4, commission consideration recommending resolution number 2019-13. Take it away.
Okay, so just for clarification, we will not be taking action on this item. So we're just going to have discussion, being that I did send the email out about the boundary changes and kind of explained there that when This was brought to council. They had questions about how we landed at the boundary that we did present to them. And what we did there is we went with the previously established, the previously established historic preservation district. And, you know, then we talked about how we have the urban renewal district, which is already established, along with that historic preservation. So we looked at the boundaries a little further, and then the map that was a part of your packet showed the comparisons. And let me pull that up. The comparison from those two previously established districts, and then the new boundaries that we are presenting. Let me get this actual imagery. And I have maps I'm going to pass out. So then this area encompasses what would be the heart of our downtown and the areas that we would find the application of the overlay district for aesthetic requirements reasonable or appropriate.
Okay, the new areas is the grade-in area, right? The white area. The gray area is the existing?
This is the historic district, this is the urban
Yeah.
renewal, and this is.
I thought the historic district was the one in the black. Border?
So the urban
That's the
renewal
urban
district is the black border.
Okay.
The white is the historic preservation
Yeah.
district boundary, and then that gray area now is the newly proposed boundary.
Okay.
Who came up with the newly proposed? Staff or?
Yep.
Okay.
How is this going to affect somebody's ability on their home anyways, the residential home? How is that going to affect their ability to get a building permit?
So they'll kind of deal with the same things that they do now, being that they are a residential home in the C1 district. I did exclude any R2A districts within the boundary. So the only residences that are included within this overlay district are actually in the C1 district that is underlying.
Like
So
along, oh, I see it.
All those along First Avenue Southwest, those apartments, and
Yeah.
so,
And along Kemp Avenue.
so they're gonna be, they would be required to comport with the rules of the fascia, the whatever.
yeah, yep, if they were doing new construction or substantial improvement. But most likely, if they're doing substantial improvement, they're going to probably want to look at rezoning or getting that conditional use where if their structure is to go away, that it can't come back.
Are we intending on notifying
come
these
back.
individuals that, of the changes to their property?
Yep, so that is where, if we agree on a boundary, then I will send out letters per our ordinance to the affected landowners, and then I will notify them that we'll be having a public hearing where we'll take action on this proposed overlay district for the downtown. And then that would be presumably on the September 5th Plan Commission meeting. And then, so we will send letters to all of the affected property owners. There will be 226.
So Brandy, you went from our little white outline that we kind of started with. You expanded quite a ways to the east and to the west.
Yep.
Well, not so much a little bit, but more so to the east and the west. What was your thinking there? Just, I mean, because of city council's suggestion, or did you take a different look at it and decide that maybe we did need to go down Kemp Avenue further?
That we didn't need to go down Kemp further than where I went?
No, was that per what the city council was kind of suggesting, or was that your own take more so when you looked at what businesses lined that Kemp?
Right. So, City Council had brought up the fact that we had kind of jogs with the Historic Preservation District where we didn't have a complete street within it, so we had half the street in it. And I know we had talked about that too. And then just with bringing it down to the south there around the courthouse, now Kemp would be the main downtown street. So extending it to 3rd and 4th, and also just in development projects that we've talked about for the future, to encompass those areas where we would want this to apply to for, and this only applies to new construction or substantial improvement. So it does nothing to them today, but what do we want to see in the future for our downtown area?
So let's just say that something kind of, I don't know, kind of like the gym that went down on East Kemp there, where it's really not, okay, let's just, trying to look here at something that maybe would be, let's take First Avenue Southeast and the block of 3rd Street Southeast. Okay, that corner, I'm not sure if that's a house or what sits there. Can they come up individually and say, it's really not it's going to be a business, but are we going to be lenient at all on what goes in? I mean, as far as, are we going to hold them to what building expectations we have, no matter what the business is, or is it going to be looked on as an individual every time?
This will apply to all of the properties and whatever the use is. Now, if they were coming in and their use didn't fit the underlying district of the C1, we'd have bigger issues.
I guess where I'm at with it, I like the compromise between the historic and the urban renewal. I would also suggest extending the boundary all the way on the south side of First Avenue North, west of First Street to encompass the Jensen Building, because that's going to be a redevelopment project at some point in time down the road. I mean, it's just a big empty building.
You're talking about the warehouse, right? That was the one question I had was like, why is First District and that warehouse not included in this? Did you intentionally leave yourself out, Todd?
We're moving, so.
I intentionally did, because First, isn't necessarily downtown. It's a through street. Where do we want, I think that having it on some portions, draw people in, you're changing the aesthetics there, but do we want to extend it?
Well, part of me I'm thinking is, so everything that Mike's been doing on the north side of First Avenue and those offices would comport with what our design requirements are being proposed right now?
Potentially, but I don't know about the transparency.
The transparency issue, but okay, so.
Of the two to.
But we would argue that, they look nice, the buildings look good, and it's an incentive to do something. And on the south side, some of those things on the south corner, southwest of the guest house, that redevelopment that's happened there, and there will be redevelopment that happens on the south side of First Avenue, at least going down to the cement business on the corner of 3rd. I could see, you see that that's probably going to happen. And again, my other concern is, I think it's great we're notifying everybody of the properties, because my biggest concern has always been, adding a new addition to residential, redevelopment of those areas and having to a certain standard for that. And then you get back to the issue of the variance or having to rezone. So if people come back and say they don't object to this, then I'm fine. If we see objections of residential use property in the C1, my recommendation is that we would take them out moving forward. But otherwise, I think it's good.
The only things I saw was that basically what he's talking about is the Jensen Building and then the block where First District is. Because, I like in the northeast corner of that block, it's a nice building, but that's exactly what we're trying to avoid with the zero or the setback rule. Having the parking lot out in front, because that creates a pedestrian safety issue. And the other thought I had too was over east of County Fair. I know Bonnie might not be happy about this, but why have we exempted? Because there's that great big, I think it's apartments or something.
Yeah, that red building. Building on First.
Yeah, there's a.
It used to be rental office with apartments upstairs, and then they came in for variance and got to have got rid of the offices and made it all apartments down on the main floor.
I could, you know, I mean, I could at least see the potential of some redevelopment, right? Not just south of that, you know, where that, I mean, it's possible. I don't know. I don't even know what's in there right now.
Which one are you talking
I don't know, is
about?
it like some, is that,
It's the old, it's everything west of where Fleet used to be many, many years ago.
I'm too
That's
young
where
for all this.
my
conversation.
office is in that old building around the corner.
Basically just where you're at, Bounty, and that whole block. I'm just curious, and I don't know if you're still there or not, but.
And the old Fleet building too, that you just mentioned, I would think.
Dating ourselves.
And
Well,
I'm just,
me
gonna-
too.
But they've really, but they have done, have you driven
Right,
by?
but I
It
ju-
looks pretty good. They
But I
have,
would think we could
brick
include
and
it in
stuff.
here on both sides, just and go a block north
because there is
on
boulevard
both
parking all
sides.
along there and everything, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not trying to suggest that it's been done poorly. I just mean that if we're trying to create a sort of a centralized structure or sort of theme here, I mean, that would certainly be geographically included.
but I think to some degree, I think less is more. If you're, you know, if we keep spreading this out too far, it kind of takes away from the heart that is, you go out too far, then you've got to,
I don't want to sound too hopeful, but I'm hopeful that there's going to be a fair amount of infill and redevelopment in this area generally, and I think including on some of the fringes of what we're seeing here already, so, I mean.
I think something too, because I think our main concern is we don't want a pole shed going up again. So I think that we could also add that to the C1 district and just say no metal buildings. And then, but we have this, this greater standard for the heart of downtown, and we put that in this overlay.
that's exactly what I mean by saying is it come on an individual basis. You know, if I'm on the out fringes, perhaps we look the other way on some things, is that, or is it when you're in that, you're in that? That's,
You're in, you're in.
okay, that's, okay.
And that's why it's important that we get it halfway right, but at the same point in time, I will forego getting it perfect for just getting it at least right, and we can always move on. I mean, it doesn't have to be exactly right, because it can evolve, but we should be in general agreement that, you know, these 6 or 8 blocks is what it needs to be, but, I've made my comments. I think it's a good start, and it will morph and change over time anyway.
So you think we should, we should
I'm fine.
include first district and county fair, that corner
I
by
think
county fair?
my personal feeling is First Avenue North is when you're coming in off of Willow Creek Bypass and you're coming in from the west, you're not taking Kemp, you're gonna be taking that road, so that's gonna be an entryway into the northern part of the central, of the commercial district. So I don't have a problem taking, except for like the public park and the fire department, some of those public grounds, doing everything along First Avenue, just to be consistent. I wouldn't go any further north than where she's got it right now, because that gets into industrial property, and I think it's,
So what you're saying sorry, so what you're saying is from Third, we're going down First Avenue right now, from Third West,
take it all to the
all the
highway.
way down
the
to
highway.
81.
Yeah.
Everything on the south side of the road.
I'd even take those non-public properties on the north side as well.
Like the old Jordan Millwork Park property?
Yep, take that corner. Take everything except for the little public park, the transportation shed, and the fire department.
Why not include them?
Right.
Well, we've just stuck a lot of money into the fire department. I don't think anything's gonna happen there. The whole shed that we've got down at the transportation thing was an issue when it got built many years ago. Again, you can either say, are we gonna hold city government to the same standard as everybody else?
Yes.
Yes, I think it's nice to have straight lines.
I agree.
Straight
I
lines are
agree.
good.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
And
too.
I
just didn't
agree
know
with
if
you,
whether- I didn't
Todd.
know whether the city wants to put that same.
Well,
onus
the
on-
council gets to choose, we can just recommend. But I agree with you that First Avenue North is becoming more of an entryway after they took those stoplights out. And I think it's gonna become more and more and more that way. It's just, if you go there and observe the traffic, it's amazing.
It just flows.
It does,
However
and
they
they're
did that
zipping
street
down
is
First
perfect.
Avenue like crazy, so
Yeah,
Keep it below 25.
But
Yeah,
that
that's right.
brings,
All
that
of-
kind of
yeah.
brings the concern, is that it is a minor collector, where we have maximum setbacks, so you can't have parking in the front. And, you know, right now we have the parking on the street, which is not typical for a collector. So is that something that, because, you know, our aesthetics are to bring people in, to be walkable, and
But why couldn't you still have the boundary, and within the boundary you have separate, distinct regulations for those that are on a minor collector as opposed to the other streets? You can exempt or some of those requirements from certain aspects within the district itself.
but we already have that in engineering design standards.
But you don't have, from the zoning perspective. I mean, if there's something in the zoning overlay district that we don't want to see apply to some of those properties along First Avenue, can't we just say we don't want to apply that, or it doesn't, you know what I'm saying?
Or just not include them.
But maybe we want the aesthetic look, but we don't want the parking requirement to apply to them, or something along those lines.
I think that if we would add that to the C1 district to say no metal buildings, that's going to take care of our main concern. But as far as having it be the, you know, like having the transparency clause, having those types of things, that's what, and the parking setbacks, anything like that, I feel like that is downtown in nature. And that's, you know, we only want that in the heart. We don't necessarily need to extend that through a collector.
So you say
we want it to when people slow down.
That section of what we've written in the overlay district doesn't apply to First Avenue Northwest. And then everything still, but the aesthetic aspect does.
But I think that if we don't want the things that we're putting in the overlay district to apply to First Avenue, that we shouldn't include it.
But what if we want everything but one thing?
Then I think that we could add that to,
But then you're making your C1, you're mirroring your C1, so then you're having confusion between your C1 and your overlay district. I mean, the C1 is still your base district. The overlay is just the extra.
yeah, so, and then we have that in there. We can have the exact same language that's in the overlay district about metal buildings in the C1, and we can take it out of the overlay district too, you know, or we can just have them compound.
I don't see any reason to be, duplicative in writing the language. I think you just pick one or the other and exclude. It's a lot easier to understand and follow. That's just me.
Okay.
Good though, I think. Do you have a direction from us then? Or is it like this?
Just say yes so we can keep moving along.
I think that, all right, so it'll be include all of the south side of First Ave or leave the boundary as presented. And I think
I'm thinking if
we do maybe a roll call.
If you're doing 226 properties, make it bigger. Now you're doing 245, and everybody gets noticed. And if somebody comes back and they say it's a real hell no for them, then that gives us a little bit better. Otherwise, what's the difference if I'm looking at one side of the street versus the other?
Aren't we talking about both sides of First Avenue North?
I was just gonna ask for clarity on that.
Oh,
Thank you.
that's right. Yes.
I could live with just the south side of First Ave, but I think we should at least include that. The only problem I see there is the county fair doesn't really fit in. I mean, but we'd like to promote them.
But their parking lot is real nice.
Yeah.
It comes in handy.
Yes, I appreciate
I'm
it.
indifferent on the north side of it. I mean, I kind of give up on First Ave because it's a fast street.
Well, see, that's where I was coming with if they come in an individual situation and say,
I don't want to be in the point where we're asking for variances from requirements. So let's just try to hit it right. So
Rhonda, where were you going?
exactly, I mean, because you just don't know what the future holds, so why couldn't we, if they petition to be released from it, Todd, same as we're debating whether we should put them in, why not give them a certain hardship to get out, I guess?
I think the opportunity.
Not in the heart, but on the fringes. Maybe it says it on the fringe streets that they could possibly be released. Not in the heart. The heart would be an absolute no, but maybe worded somehow that.
What would be the basis for saying I want out?
Because I'm not, I don't know. I'm just.
I would say it's either you just apply it to everybody, and then if they want to get out, they can get out. I mean, anybody could ask to do that at any point in time. I just assume not lead them the path to getting out if we think it's the intent of keeping everything consistent and whole in the area. I will make a recommendation and a motion to take what has been presented by staff, including the south side of First Avenue North between Highway 81 and 3rd Street, at least for discussion, and move it on.
A motion, do you have a second?
Second.
Discussion, or are we voting on this thing?
Mr. Chairman, if I could just point out one factor that was brought up at the council meeting in relation to the streets dividing this boundary. And maybe since First is a collector, it's okay to use that as a dividing boundary. But the concept that was brought to our attention by the council was, does it make sense to apply it on one side of a street and not the other? So, and I realize Brandy's draft here definitely does that along First Street. But otherwise, throughout the district, she tried to make this boundary run through the alleyways and things of that nature so that we didn't have contrasting regulations on one side of the street versus the other. I just wanted to make that a point of record as far as the discussion at the council level. And like I said, maybe because First is a collector, that is a good defining boundary that we are okay having it on one side of the street and not the other.
I'm gonna remake a motion just to include everything on the north and south side of First Avenue for the purposes, at least to notify everybody that owns property that's in the neighborhood, and then we get their comments, and from there we go with that. I don't want to extend it more further north in that line of the guest house that you've got already identified.
Second.
Okay, so was that an amended motion or
Amended
amending
motion.
it? Okay.
Second.
Substitute motion.
All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passed.
Perfect, thank you guys. Good direction.
No.
She's got new business.
We got open public comment. Anybody here that wants to speak in the open section of the meeting? Seeing none, moving along. New business.
I don't have any, but Diana, did you? Or?
Well, I mean, I think there was some discussion in the Board of Adjustments meeting based on what we just dealt with on the Easy Store issue. Do we want to revisit the sign code? I mean, yeah, sorry, Todd. I mean,
Wasn't the reason for leaving it open-ended like that because weren't we waiting to hear the decision for the off-premise, on-premise, and how you would regulate that if it was content neutral?
Content neutral argument is not going to happen for quite a bit of time. I think what it is I would rather see, if we're looking at cracking the book again, is getting in specifically, getting rid of the sign code, Board of Appeal references to the Board of Adjustments, standardizing the administration. If it was going to be that, yes, you as the Board of Adjustment can issue a on and off premise, under what conditions? That's what I'm saying. That's what needs to be changed. I think everything else that we've spent years on is probably standard, and what Mr. Stein said too. We spent a lot of time over several different iterations of this. I think it's more of an administrative section thing that we need to fix, and how to deal with a request that that Lonnie brought to us tonight. Under what circumstances is it okay to say yes, and under what circumstances is it okay to say no, and boxing ourselves into that discussion so that we don't get into this willy-nilly. It's great for Lonnie, but it's not great for somebody else moving forward. I think that's the change that I would recommend.
well, and we need to designate what the action is.
Yeah.
I mean, is it a conditional use permit? Is it, I mean, what is it? Is it a variance?
If they're just changing the face to on-premise, to off-premise, whatever, I mean, do we really care? Do we want that to even come to?
Well, we must have, because that's what the rule was. It wasn't something that was automatic.
Right. I mean, what I would add is, and I clarified this with Ken as we were having that discussion, is that for some reason our forefathers decided to put that language in there, but it's still, even if it changes from on sale or on premise to off premise, it still has to meet the requirements of an off premise sign. And so maybe we should just strike that whole reference and just require them to apply as they would for an off-premise sign.
That might make the most sense.
I don't know, just a thought.
But if you're trying to eliminate it being at every single sign all the way through town, you should put a minimum size to the sign.
Minimum area that you
Yeah.
can put on a
So then
size
all of a
lot.
sudden, every 4-foot by 10-foot digital sign down there can't apply and become off on premise. I mean, the 500-foot is gonna help, and the 50-foot regulation between is gonna help, but if you say an off-premise sign has to be, I think our maximum size is 288 square feet, if you say the minimum size is 200 square feet, you're gonna eliminate every one of these little single businesses that now has a digital sign from coming to make the application too.
Right.
Can we do,
If that's the direction you wanna go, I don't care, I'm just throwing out a suggestion, trying to control that more.
can we set that for discussion? Some sort of amended ordinance that adds that for discussion?
Yeah, I mean,
Yep.
just, I think maybe it's probably staff coming in and giving us what it is that you guys think it says and what we can and can't do, and then whether or not we're warm to that. And then if we need to, how do we fix it so we can allow what Lonnie wants to do, because maybe it makes sense in that situation, but restrict it in other places and have that discussion.
Well, and as Stuart had alluded to, is potentially staff can get a meeting together with the group just to get everyone's input, because everyone did put a lot of time into it.
Yeah.
So that we're not. So we'll work on that internally. And then get something to you guys as.
You guys, please turn on your microphones. I've been an awful time over here.
So then we'll bring that back as discussion before we would bring it to you for an ordinance amendment and the public hearing, so.
Okay, thank you. Any other new business?
Mr.
No
Chairman,
business, oh, sorry.
I was just going to announce to the planning commissioners the change or slight restructuring that the city council recently approved along with the mayor in the formation of a public works department. That doesn't necessarily directly affect any of the planning or building functions of the city, but the planning and building functions are now part of a unified public works department, which includes 6 divisions. One of those is building services, which Ken will remain the building official for. Engineering, that I will remain the city engineer for. And wastewater and solid waste division, street division, the Upper Big Sioux Watershed Project, and
Airport.
the airport.
Congratulations, Heath.
And
That's awesome.
thank you, Commissioner
That's
Case.
awesome. That's a big hat.
And in my position, just to clarify, is Public Works Director / city engineer. So I'll be working closely with my assistant city engineer and performing the engineering duties, but also being the manager over those divisions as well.
That's awesome. Mr. Chair, I just wanted a quick announcement, and October 16th and 17th is the South Dakota Planners Conference in Brookings this year. So I think registration forms will be coming out after Labor Day.
Yep.
And so just, you guys might want to just pencil that into your calendar. Should be a lot of good information.
16th and 17th, you said?
16th and 17th.
Thank you for that, Todd.
And I want to thank you, Brandy, on behalf of the board. I'm sure we're so appreciative you sent out those emails with the overlays and all the information, and you got right on that when we asked you to, and it was so helpful.
Yes, thank
Good
you
job.
guys for the feedback and working through it. We'll get there.
All right, any other new business? All right, moving along. Any old business?
Yes, and this will be brief because we did touch on this at our staff meeting, trying to clarify exactly our intentions with this RG sidewall articulation. Now, we amended this in 2017, and it actually hasn't came up yet until now. We do have a builder that is working in this district and trying to figure out what exactly he needs to do to comply. It's not that he's wanting to ask for a variance or anything, but I just wanted to clarify with you guys that it was our intention that it would just be the sidewall articulated. So if it so since we allowed them to go up to 16 feet in height, usually it's 12 feet. So, yes, the sidewall height. And so then with that, we said that if you're going higher than 12 feet and the length of the wall is longer than 20 feet, you have to do some sort of articulation, and that would be, you know, butting that out 2 feet by 6 feet. So and that was just so we were eliminating like big boxy looking garages in nice residential neighborhoods. And then with the definition, the sidewall articulation was defined as a variation in the outward appearance of the walls forming the side of a structure. So that would mean that the front, you know, if they're doing a double garage, that's 24 feet typically, I mean minimal. So are you guys okay with that, with the front and the end not having to worry about articulating if they go longer than 20 feet? Is that
I'm having a hard time visualizing what the 20 feet and the 2 feet and.
That was the illustration I had up. I'll go up there again. I just wanted to go to the definition to tell you guys.
Like your basic 36-foot long garage, you'll go like have 20 feet, 2 feet out, and then 16 feet the rest of the way?
Yeah,
That type of deal?
yeah, but it at least has to be 2 feet out and 6 feet in length. And that would just be on the sidewalls. So then you're not necessarily.
And it's only required if the sidewall exceeds 12 foot in height. So if you have a 12-foot sidewall, you can still run that 36 feet.
What's the maximum sidewall height?
16. So if
This is
you'll
just
see,
in the RG district, though. Not all garages, it's just the RG district.
if you see in this illustration, and I blew it up here, so the words are fuzzy. Okay. This depicts that this sidewall height is 12 feet. The length of the sidewall is greater than, if it's not greater than 20 feet, they do not need to articulate.
Okay.
But I don't feel like the
That'll
length
look
of the
like an
sidewall,
old wood granary.
length of the
Tall
sidewall
and
greater
thin.
than 20 feet, not in conformance. Length of the sidewall less than 20 feet, in conformance.
Where do we have one of these districts at? I forget. Or do we not have one?
Across the road from the lake.
This is Pheasant Ridge. Pheasant Lane.
Oh, okay, sorry. So this note here, it said sidewall greater than 12 feet. So, but if it's under 12 feet, it doesn't apply. So then this one here shows how you would articulate and our minimum. So that this would be a run of 20 feet in length. Then they would have to jut out 2 feet and at least run it by 6 feet more.
Now would that be facing the road, or that's only in the side yard?
Side yard.
And it stipulates that in the ordinance, it's only in the side
Yes.
yard?
Yep, that definition that I went down to, it does say for the sides of the building, of the structure.
So
And that's what I just wanted
So in
clar-
the front, it would be long and boxy when you're driving down the street.
It could be, yeah, but you know, at least there will be doors that would visually break that up. But the side, they're not required to have windows, so it could just be a big, tall wall.
Something longer than 20.
I've lost what the question is, Brandy.
So I just wanted to I just wanted to confirm with you guys that that was our intention, that it would just
Okay.
be the sidewall. I've convinced myself that that was, but I want to run it by you guys.
For what it's worth, that was my recollection as well.
Okay.
So,
Does staff have any recommendation? Should it be something other than the sidewall?
No, I'm good with it being this way.
And if there's,
Ken, what do you think? Oh,
And
okay.
I put this on here before we discussed it at the staff meeting. So after the staff meeting, I felt much clearer.
is any construction requirements on that, or did we just leave that completely off? It can be pole building, it can be steel, it can be lap siding.
Residential siding.
It can be a pole building, but it has to have a residential exterior appearance.
Okay.
Okay, so we are all on the same page. That is just a sidewall articulation as it's defined. All right, perfect. I'm good. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other old business?
Not that I have.
All right, do we need an executive session?
Nope.
All right, a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? Liam? Yeah. All in favor? Aye. We're adjourned, thank you.
Thank you all.